Well, hello everyone, and happy Monday to you, and happy St. Patrick's Day for those that celebrate it. I'm Mark Sugiyama from Eclectic Arts Media, based here in Seattle, Washington, and welcome to Conversations with Kate, featuring Kate Black Spence. This is session 4, if I can do my fingers right. And so it's really exciting that we're getting into a rhythm, and if you've been joining the other live streams that we've done and other sessions, then you kind of know what we're going to be trying to do today. If this is your first time joining us, then we'll definitely talk about what we're going to be going over. This is the first recurring series that I've ever had. There's a second one now that started in January, and there's actually a third that's going to be starting tomorrow night. And I'll speak about that right at the end as we kind of wrap things up. Typically, we do these sessions for an hour, and Kate and I work through the different topics that we decide to tackle at any given time. Some of them are going to get tabled till, the cows come home, and some of them might get tabled till next month or whatever. It's really kind of up to us. It's very different than a one-on-one interview. So if you're used to watching me do those types of things, this is much more of a collaboration. And I've also had to learn how to give up some control because with one-on-one interviews, the heavy lifting's done by me. The guests can show up and just be ready to hopefully have a good time and answer some questions and talk about what they have going on. But with this thing, it's a little bit different. And that's exactly what I wanted. I wanted to make sure that it was not like the one-on-one interviews, and also that it's not like the other recurring series. They're unique to each one of what's going on, the person that's involved, the guest that's involved. And my plan is to keep it that way. So thank you for joining us. And there also is a playlist on the YouTube channel. So if you want to see all of them, going back to episode 1 back in October, they're all there in order so you can watch them. I'm in the process of getting the audio off of these so that I can finally put them into a podcast format. I've had people asking me about my interviews forever about when are you going to do this? I can just listen to you on Spotify or Apple Music or any of these other type of things where you can listen to podcasts. And I just never got around to it. So, but this series made sense to try to pull the audio from it. And so, of course, when that's ready to go, I will announce that on my Instagram account, which is Eclectic Arts Media. And then that'll migrate over to Facebook and some of these other places where we do business. But without further ado, I'd like to welcome my partner in crime here, Kate Black Spence.
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing great, Kate. How are you?
Doing all right. Small cold, so my voice is extra sultry right now. So enjoy that.
Yeah, I was gonna say you might be able to do some interesting recordings that you can
do my Kathleen Turner impressions.
Yeah, no, that's a great example. And can just add to your resume or add to your sizzle reel or something. I can also do this. But I hope you feel better. I know for myself, at least, I don't have a cold, but I have perennial allergies. I've had them since I was a kid. And now that we're getting closer to spring, then things are like, I'm usually congested pretty much every day. And so and my eyes water and I have gunk there. And it's just like, oh, great.
Oh, that is rough. I'm so sorry. It's almost harder knowing on a calendar, like we're getting close to it on this day. I'm going to feel like crap.
Yeah, that's pretty much how it is. And I know there was a time in the past where I had an in-person video interview to do with a guest. I think it was with a band, if I remember right. And my allergies were just crazy that day. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have like snot running on my nose and just be disgusting. And I so don't want to be presenting myself this way to somebody. And I was popping pills and all kinds of stuff just to try to get that to dry out for maybe like 15 minutes. Just stop doing this for 15 minutes. And then I can go watch the show and have, a bunch of Kleenex in my pockets or whatever I need to do.
Yeah.
But, and sure enough, I made it through about 10 minutes of that interview. And then I could feel it starting to run. I'm like, excuse me for a second. And I'm like,
I'm out.
Just like gross. And to them, they didn't really seem to care. But again, for me, I wanted a certain standard. And it's just like, oh, come on.
No, I get that. I get it. I mean, it's human. We all have these moments, but doesn't mean you want it to be chronicled in front of people that you respect.
Exactly. Yeah. So, oh, let's take a group picture. I'm like, no, let's not do that.
Not today.
No selfies today. And for folks that are watching, or if you're listening at work, I know a lot of people tend to do that, so they can't really watch the YouTube part, but they're hearing the audio. If you have a question or comment, always put it into the chat through YouTube or Twitch. And then we'll either address it now or it's something that we might be able to bring up next month or what have you. So we would love the interaction from you. And if you're seeing this down the road, if it's, Friday of this week, then please do the same thing. You can leave a comment on YouTube. You can also DM me, and then we can, Kate and I can, volley this stuff back and forth and kind of figure out what we want to tackle. So as we tend to do, we do like a brief recap of anything that may have happened from last month or the episode before, back in February. It's weird to say back in February that we're in March now. So when we left, one of the things we were talking about was that Kate was going to be doing an interview. And so if she would like to kind of give a little update of where things are at with that.
Yeah, it was an interview for grad school, something that I had not really considered, but then life started happening and things started sort of putting new ideas in my path. And I came across this grad school program that on the website described itself as a collaborative program between writers, actors, and directors. And when I was looking more at the writers page, because again, I consider myself more an actor sometimes than a writer, but I'm starting to sort of challenge that. But so I'm starting to look more at this writer page, and it included photos from like on location shoots and these things that I was like, oh my God, like the writer gets to be there. Like this is exactly the kind of program that I want. I want to be a writer who's collaborative. It's the reason as an actor that I became interested in writing, is because I had this great collaborative experience frequently with different writers and world premieres, and it was just delightful. So the first question in the interview was, why here? And I was like, this collaborative nature that you describe, it's exactly what I'm looking for. And I love these photos, even the photos that you use to sort of represent the experience for writers in your program. It's so exciting to me. I'm passionate about that. And she's like, okay, well, I'm not in charge of what they put on the website, but just to be clear, you're going to be in a writer's room for a year with other writers. And I was like, okay. And so the actors just come into the room for the collaborations, and she's like, no. She's like, you're just going to be with writers. And I was like, cool. Our idea of collaboration is different. But I didn't say that obviously, but it was the first thing that was like talked about in the interview. And I was shook the rest of the interview because I realized that is the same kind of program that is offered at most universities domestically. And I was looking at London, and I was looking at London because they seemed to do something different that I was excited about. And to hear that they do the same sort of grad school program that is pretty typical here and certainly much more affordable here than in London, that was really hard for me to process while also still trying to do the interview. But then, I truly believe interviews are a great opportunity, no matter what side of the table you're on, to be interviewing the other person. And so I was getting a read on her, and she would be the instructor for our writers. And I just didn't feel like we were speaking the same language. And I would imagine that she felt the same way. It was just sort of disappointing all around, and clearly not what I was looking for. And clearly, I think she felt the same. So I haven't heard anything. I wouldn't hear anything until next month. But I've been doing a lot of soul searching on it. And I think even if I get in, I just don't think I can say yes to that program. So that's been a real bummer because I had a really clear idea of what I thought things were going to be for me. And I'm processing that right now.
Well, one, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
And I think it's very relatable. And it's interesting too, that at least if it's a little bit of a silver lining, that it seemed like both yourself, what you had thought this program was going to be, turns out it really wasn't, but also that you weren't really clicking with your interviewer either. Because sometimes maybe the interviewer seems like they're really great and everything, but then with what's coming out of their mouth about the program, you're like, oh, wait a minute, that's not what I thought this was. And then you're still trying to keep that face on about being interested and I'm the right candidate. And you're in the back of your head, like, I don't know if I'm the right candidate. I don't know if this is the right program even for me.
Right.
But it seems like there was definitely like a disconnect pretty much from the get-go. But once you heard what it was about, it's like, well, wait a minute, that's not what I had in my head.
Right.
What are you talking about?
Right. It was, and I realized how much of that, I mean, I created a very clear idea of what I thought the program was. I made that. It's true. The website didn't say that. It just said a collaborative between actors, writers, directors. So in my head, I'm the one imagining we get together in these groups, right? We discuss what we're working on, how to be of most value to each other. I had a very clear idea in my head. And I think in some ways, what I really appreciate about the experience is that it's made it really clear for me what I want and the fact that I don't think it exists. And if it doesn't, then is there a way that I can create it here in my own community using a combination of the tools that I have as an actor who knows tons of actors, as a filmmaker, using our filmmaker meetup groups? Like, is there some way that I can put this together myself? And that's certainly been a thing with the eclipse and everything that like changes, that it represents such massive changes. And here I am now imagining a totally different thing now moving forward. So you never know. But I will say, Mark, because you'll get this. So I sent the Static Space script, or maybe it was even just a synopsis, and she didn't like it, and she said that she's like, well, why did you set it in space? And I was like, well, it's not really set in space so much as it is set in like Indiana, and someone's in space, and so I was explaining like the symbolic nature of isolation, and that the only person that can understand sometimes what it feels like to be in rural Indiana is the idea of someone in a solo mission in space. And she's like, okay, so almost her exact words, I think, were something to the effect of like, yeah, that's what we call like a writing problem. So a real writer would know how to create a real obstacle to keep these characters apart from each other. And like, you couldn't, so you just said space. And I was like, oh, well, I think that's a vast overgeneralization of my thought process. But okay. But, it's fun. Again, it's also British. British people don't have a big horse in the space race. So, of course, that didn't resonate with them. But anyway, it's done. It is what it is.
That tells me all I need to know about this woman and this program. I'm sorry. I'll generalize her all I want right now because that's a load of crap. And it reminds me when I was back in college and I would start pushing back on my professors, because to me, that's one of the reasons why I was there, to challenge your thinking. That's why you're in college.
Yes.
And if you can't handle that as the professor, and I'm not trying to say any kind of thing personally or anything malicious, but just like if there's a method, like since I was an education major and I didn't agree with the method, I think this other method has more merit to it, and I would bring that up. I had a professor that got really, really offended by anything I said with those pushbacks. I'm like, you should be pushing back on me and telling me why this is, the best thing in your opinion. And you're the professor. You've been doing this for 20 years or what have you. And she failed me.
Oh.
She failed me through that class. And I had to go have a meeting with her. It was like an hour long after the whole quarter was over. And she flat out said, "What problem do you have with me?" And I'm like, I don't have a problem with you. And so when I'm hearing just a tidbit of what you mentioned about with this interview gal, that I start picturing somebody of that side of things. And I could be wrong, but just like, you're so pretentious and full of yourself that you can't even articulate. And this is during, like you're saying, this is during an interview for a grad program. I would want to know more about the candidates and their thought process, not to sit there and pick at it, but to know where are you coming from and how do you fit in with the other, 30 candidates that we have or the new ones that we're interviewing.
Yeah, I was surprised even early on. There were some writing prompts that she was giving me. She said, let's play some writer's prompts. And I geek out for a good writer's prompt. I mean, like, I can go. I love it. And so she gave me one and I started on it and she like cuts me off. And she's like, I feel like you're not understanding me. And so she says it again the exact same way. And I'm like, in my head, right? I'm like, no, I understood you. I must be doing it wrong, which is so strange because, again, to me, a writer's prompt, especially in an interview setting, is just so you can see how my brain works and you can see where I'm going with it and what I'm coming up with. But again, it's part of the value of interviews is just sort of being like, we are not going to be on the same page. And There's really no reason to pretend otherwise. I think if I was younger, if I, you know, I am old to be going to grad school. There's no age limit on education, but the average student's age there is going to be significantly younger than me. If I was coming to this was more of a blank slate without all of my own experiences, I can imagine that being really beneficial to what she's looking for. But I think I'm bringing in too much of my own ideas and too many of my own preconceived notions of what works and what doesn't work for me. And so yeah, I think in the end, maybe just academia is not where I need to go next, and that's okay. It's good to know. Still a bummer.
Yeah, and I hear everything you just said because for it's a full transparency for people that are watching and listening that I've been looking for a day job for quite a while now, and so the interview process and the job market's been really interesting. There's been many times in my life because I'm an old fart where I've been in between jobs, and I've never encountered a market like this. I've never encountered people being so unprofessional, and it's just really baffling to me sometimes. And as Kate said, you absolutely learn things from the interview process, even if it's something that didn't work maybe in your favor. It could be like, no, that was a blessing that I interviewed with you and I found out I don't want to work for you or your company based on how this interview is going. It's definitely a two-way street, but also moving forward, it does make you kind of rethink and maybe recalibrate about what am I actually looking to do? What kind of place am I trying to work for? In my case, I'm actually going to be going or trying to go back into what my past was and not what I was currently doing for the last 3 or 4 years. And it's been interesting I thought I'll never go back to that kind of work in the world of nonprofits and the world of working with students and children and things of that nature. But right now, knock on wood, that's where it looks like it's heading. And I'm actually looking forward to it because it's been at least about a 10-year break of me in that world. And so I think I've had enough space to grow in other areas and do other things. I'm definitely, the media outlets afforded me these opportunities to really kind of find out who I am in all aspects of my life. And so those interviews that I've had that didn't go my way, or I had somebody completely offer me a job, I said yes to it, and then they ghosted me. And that's locally. It wasn't. I could go drive to their office right now, and so it's kind of like,
Oh gosh.
what's going on here? I've
Yeah.
never had that happen.
We
Um,
live in a strange time of ghosting having become a thing and an acceptable thing. This is so relatively new in the grand scheme of how things have always been done and how they're like professionally and personally. It's very strange. I don't remember ever seeing this kind of behavior before. But again, old parts. So like we have that. We have things to compare it to.
Yeah, absolutely we do. And yeah, it's new for me on the professional side. I can
Yeah.
understand like maybe I inquired about a job or something to see if it's still open and then maybe I don't hear back, but not when somebody offers you the position and wants a start date and that kind of normal stuff.
Yeah.
And so as I was telling Kate before the show, I've got interviews this week and I've got one today right after this live stream. So I have to change out of this my comfortable clothes into the monkey suit and go do my thing. I've
Wishing you
already
luck
done.
on that.
Thank you. I've already done phone screens with 3 companies last week, and they're all want me to come in person now. So first round's done. This is the more real round, since you're gonna be there in front of anywhere from 2 to 5 people or whatever it is. And I'll see because I am absolutely interviewing them. I want to kind of know, especially if I have options, why are you the best option?
Right. Right.
And we'll see. And also, like Kate, what you were saying earlier too, that you might be finding with your circle of friends and partners and talent and things that you've known and accumulated over the years, that you might be able to find a way to reach that goal of what you want through your own means. And
Yeah.
sometimes that can be really exciting. It could be a lot of work, but still at the same time, it's like, oh, I didn't think, I thought I was going to be going this direction and now I'm pivoting this way. And it turns out, and in hindsight, maybe this way was actually what you were supposed to be doing all along.
Right.
And this wasn't meant to be. I mean, and I've talked about this for I don't know how many times on these live streams, but I never thought I was going to be doing this.
Right. Right. Yeah.
I was sitting on my couch when COVID started, and I'm kind of like, well, what am I going to do now? Just like every other photographer and writer and everything, all of the events had shut down. So I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And then I went back to doing email/written interviews with some guests I'd done interviews with prior. And then, one of them happened to be the singer of Alice, Tosh Cox. And she said, hey, Mark, we're going to go on this virtual tour and we'd like to have you open up our shows. And so then the ball rolled from there. And this is number 383.
Oh,
Since
lucky 383.
Yeah. May 22nd, 2020 was the first live stream I ever did on that tour. So again, I had no idea. I had no concept of what this is. I was freaked out about how this was going to work. And then now I love it. I've connected with so many people from literally around the world because of this format. And so, yeah, I could still not be doing this. I could be doing, in-person stuff once, the pandemic was kind of clearing. But this is an integral part of what I do now. And again, almost 5 years ago, I was like, what are you talking about? What is this?
I mean, we all reinvent ourselves all the time. And I think that the strangest thing about that is that you never know when it's about to start. Like the first step is always just something as sort of like we'll see, I don't know. And then all of a sudden you look back on it, like that was the moment. Things took a total different shift for me. So yeah, well, I wish you luck. I want to hear how those go and how this interview and hopefully your future new job is going by the time we meet up next month.
Yeah, I'll definitely have some sort of update. And we're going to move into another topic real quick here, but I always flash back to Wall Street from Oliver Stone from 1985. And the Charlie Sheen character of Bud Fox has been trying to meet Gordon Gekko, who's the big mover and shaker on Wall Street. He's the one that can make or break his career. And he's been after him to get an appointment for a whole year. Every day he's calling his secretary, trying to get an appointment with Gordon Gekko, who's played by Michael Douglas. And he finally shows up. He's, oh, here's my in. It's Gordon's birthday today. So I'll just show up with a box of cigars, his favorite cigars, and say, hey, I've got a present, so-and-so Natalie or whatever the secretary's name was. And she takes the gift and says, wait out here and I'll see. And it said, 5 minutes. That's what you're going to get. And he's there straightening up his tie and everything in the mirror. And he's like, they say life comes down to a few moments. And he's like, this is one of them.
Aww.
And then he goes in there. Yeah, and it changes his life. So I think about that all the time, just like what you mentioned, that you never know where it's going to come from, but there's going to be something when you can look back and right then and there, that's where it shifted whatever's going on in my life, personally, professionally. It's just again, I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but when I was doing the model photography for over 10 years, I never wanted to do that. It was not something I had no interest in that. But once a coworker that I used to share an office with, he asked me about taking headshots of for himself. And he didn't know, we never talked about photography or that I'd taken a photography class way back in junior high or whatever it was. But I started asking him all these questions. What do you want? This, or this? He was, just take some pictures of my face. That's all you have to do. And I'm kind of like, well, no, I think there's more to it than that. If you want them to look good, but okay. I took some pictures of him inside and outside, just using his point and shoot or whatever he had at the time. He brought him home. He and his wife were looking at them, and his wife is the one that told him, wow, those are really good. Who took these pictures? And then he came in and said, Mark, this is the picture I'm going to use for my business cards and my website. He was meeting potential employees from Craigslist at the time. I didn't know what that site was. And so he said, Mark, you know what? There's photographers on there that are always looking for models. You should do that. I'm like, for what? What am I going to do? I don't have an interest in shooting models. You mean runway models or stuff? And he's like, oh, kind of, different types of models that they're looking for. And I'm like, no, I don't want to do this. But then it was probably a good 2 months later, I got curious about Craigslist. I started poking through all the different subsections of it. And I saw some of those ads he was talking about. I'm like, oh, these are kind of interesting. And I'm like, well, maybe I'll put up an ad and see what happens. And then if people actually reply to it, then it's going to get very real to me. And I got to make a decision. Are you doing this or are you not? Right. And sure enough, I got 7 people that were interested in, modeling for me. And then I'm like, oh, shit.
I don't know what to do now.
Yeah, am I going to say yes? And if I do, I better have a process. I better come up with a name. I better have all these things, all these ducks in a row that I would want to see if I was on the other end of this conversation as a model. And then I went and did over 1,000 shoots. I mean, it was ridiculous.
Wild.
So yeah, it just speaks to what we're talking about. There's certain moments that happen that you don't predict, you don't know when they're coming, and then it became such a huge piece. And then from that, being a concert photographer for me, I had a background in how to do photography. So
Incredible. The things they open up too. It's just wild. That's my favorite thing my therapist ever told me is like, you're holding life like this. You know exactly what you want. You're holding it so tight. She's like, you can still keep it in your hand and hold it like this. And then other things might fall into your palm as you're holding it. She's like, it doesn't mean you have it any less. And that was really important to me because as I felt strongly as an actor that I was like, if I don't preserve my integrity and do nothing but acting, then no one will take me seriously. And it's like, why? Why do I think that's true? And I know why, but like it's so silly. And I think we all do it to ourselves to different extents. And like, so just let it go. And then also maybe write a little bit and then maybe also filmmake a little bit. And all of a sudden you have a really great little musical. I don't have a musical. I don't know what my subconscious just tried to do. I don't know musicals. But I have this, these great plays that I love and these great short films that I love that I'm so proud of. So you never know.
that's a really great. I would, if someone had said that to me, it would be like an epiphany, really,
Yeah.
because I'm constantly grinding. I'm constantly thinking that I need to be hitting this. And sometimes when I hit this, even on the Alice tour, I'm sure I probably drove them nuts because I was kind of like, I wanted to know all the details. And when something didn't go right or they had to change something, I'm like, oh, I'm getting frustrated with it. And it's like, Mark, relax. We're
Yeah.
still going to do this. We're still going to do your interview. We're just going to do it, 15 minutes later. Is it okay with your guest? And oh, the guest can't do it at the time. We can do a pre-record and we can just air it. We don't have to do it live. And just basically being really nice to me and saying,
Yeah.
you know what, we're all strung out right now. We're in this thing that we've never experienced before in the pandemic. And it was them getting a glimpse into my brain of like, I'm constantly not satisfied with what I do because that's how I got where I'm at now. At least that's how I used to think. And then sometimes, not all the time, I can kind of relax. I've kind of learned that lesson of like, just kind of take things as they come.
Yeah.
And the other
That's
lesson
hard.
too, it is absolutely because I want to make things happen. And sometimes, you can bust your ass and still not make something happen
For
because
sure.
it's just not the right time for it.
Right.
And that's a hard pill to swallow,
Mhm.
especially if you're a creative. It's a real hard pill to swallow.
And also for a creative, the worst thing you can do is really try to force a square peg into that round hole. It's just never worth it.
Yep, absolutely. I know, and I was talking with people last week on some live streams about that. If you're writing songs, which I used to do, some of them just literally just like pour out of you. They'll be done in like 5 minutes. It's like wherever this inspiration is coming, I'm writing that wave, and I'm gonna keep writing it.
Right.
And then other times you'll labor over something and you get frustrated. And you're like, well, I better just leave this alone for a while, come back to it maybe tomorrow or even next week and see where we're at. Because the longer I spend with it, the worse it's getting. So just stop. It's just not happening right now. And it's
Yeah,
frustrating. Um,
absolutely.
but yeah, so that's where we're at, folks, with things. So, Kate, I hope that you find the path that you are, it's going to be best for you of what you're
Thank you.
looking for and meeting your goals. And then I'll be sure to update everybody next month on where I'm at, or you might even see something on my social media about, finally, I got
I hope
something.
so. Yeah.
Going back to this world where some of you know me or whatever. Um, but so if we shift gears, Kate, you can present this because you brought a short film to the table for us to discuss and check out. So I'll let you kind of talk about that first.
Oh, I did, but I should have been more prepared to make a really great intro on this. So I know. Okay, okay. So Allison Kurtz is a friend of mine who I met actually through Static Space. She reached out to me. Well, she reached out to a group of people and was like, "Does anyone have any experience with having ever written something and produced it and like made a film?" And I was like, "Me, I do." And so she and I started talking about it that way because she had this film she wanted to create called Never Hike Alone. And it's a beautiful short film that I'm so happy that she's finally made. But what I don't know is I know she also made it with another woman, and I feel terrible that I don't know the other woman's name. Beth. Beth is her first name, and I will eventually find her last name. Okay, well, they're both very talented people, but Allison Kurtz is actually one of the reasons I was looking at grad school across seas. She is a grad student at the Royal Conservatory of Scotland. And so that's where she created this film. And she did it with Beth. It was originally supposed to be two separate short films, which is probably news to you, Mark. But like, I'd love to hear your impression of it without giving too much away. I will say the original film idea of hers was a short film that she wrote. And the Beth's short film that she wrote was going to be sort of the same world. And then in the editing room is where they started to like be like, this is the same story. And so they put it together, which I found really interesting.
Okay, that's good to have that background on that film. And that again, full transparency, folks. I was telling Kate that when I watched the short film yesterday, because of all these job interviews and all these other kind of details that are swimming in my head, I wasn't probably as present as I normally would be. Not meaning that I was sitting there on my phone or on my laptop while it was playing. It just meant that I'm watching this. I'm kind of like, oh, what about this? Don't forget to do that, and blah blah blah. But for people that know me well, my background, I don't know, ever since I was probably like not even a teenager, I've always been interested in thriller, horror films of that nature. And I was kind of pleasantly surprised that this film kind of goes into that realm a bit. I didn't really know what to expect based on the title. I mean, it sounds kind of ominous with that that title, but it doesn't mean that's what it's going to be. And I think what I liked about it, first off the top of my head, was that I could understand the story and what they were trying to accomplish with it from the writing side. I don't know if they actually hit the mark execution wise with the imagery that was being presented. And so, again, I'm trying not to give away what it's about or, plot lines and things of that nature. I could follow it, and I think I could follow it because of my background, either as a film critic or as just a film nerd. And especially when they got to the cabin and so, okay, I can kind of see where this is kind of going. And sure enough, that's where it went. But it didn't seem like it was kind of choppy to me. So I don't know if that's from the editing process. Yeah, I don't know if it was kind of choppy or like you just mentioned that these were actually two different scripts, but that were kind of similar. And I wonder if that I kind of feel like they kind of got in the way of each other now that I know that in the background.
Ooh, yeah, I don't know. That's so funny. So I had read one of the short films, which was originally called Upcycled, and that was Allison's. And I liked what it was and what it represented, and I thought it had a lot of potential and promise. But it wasn't until I saw this short film presented where it's integrated, where I was like, oh, this is substantial. Like, this is so fascinating. I actually found I was mad impressed with the images. Personally, I thought the locations that they found were incredible. And I thought when I read the script, I saw a lot of those visuals in my head, and it was almost exactly the ones that they used. So I was actually really almost moved by what I was seeing. But I'm trying to think of, I think what I liked was the aspect ratio, right? Was the thing they sort of were playing with to show going back in time or going to a different storyline. And I'm always a fan of using it that way. Excuse me. And yeah, I don't want to give too much away, but I thought that the two stories served each other really nicely. And maybe it's because you do have more of a horror background. I did not see that coming for me. Like when they got back to the cabin, there was a moment, I think there was maybe one moment where I was like, oh, we're still here. And I feel like it wants to move forward. And then it did. And I was pleasantly surprised the rest of the time. And especially with like the ending, the little denouement ending. Oh, I thought it was I was really surprised. Again, I had read the script, but I geeked out when I saw the final product because I did not see as much possibility in it as I feel like I ended up seeing in the short film, which I thought was fun. And again, Beth Gallagher, I had to look her up because I feel terrible not knowing her name. So Allison Kurtz and Beth Gallagher. And Allison ended up directing her own piece, which I think was the right choice, and ultimately one that I was the one that told her. I was like, it sounds like you have a lot of strong ideas about how it should be directed. Any reason you're not directing it yourself? And she's like, that sounds hard. I was like, yeah, do it. And then she reached out to me like weeks later and she's like, you were right. I have to do it. I was like, yeah. So yeah, I don't know. I really enjoyed it. But again, I'm not a big horror buff. So there might have been a lot there that you might have recognized as predictable, I guess, but certainly not me.
I would say that the ending after the credits was something that I really liked because it kind of gave this other, again, without ruining it, this kind of other surprise, I guess you could say. But I've also seen that many times in horror films. Actually, I've seen something similar to that instead of a podcast. It was something that was being live broadcast from like a radio station type of thing where there was a final message that was going to go out if something like, didn't go the way it was supposed to go. And so that's why I'm kind of flashbacking like, wait a minute, this isn't real new to me because I've seen other people do it. But doesn't mean that I didn't enjoy that part because I didn't anticipate that happening in this film. So that was nice. That's why I said, oh yeah, it kind of brings a smile on my face, a little chuckle. I thought that's pretty cool. There's some justice in the world, but I don't know how many. And again, I think I just had a horror movie that I reviewed that was a couple weeks ago at least. And it's so hard to do. And I mean, you could argue this. It's hard to do anything original in any film, I suppose. But horror in particular, they kind of go through the same tropes, or they kind of go through the same things. And they know, especially like for low budget feature films, most of them will make their money back and then maybe even get a profit. That's why that niche genre still exists the way that it does, because they can sell it. They can sell it overseas, and now we're streaming. It's created a whole different market for it. And yeah, I couldn't even tell you how many horror films I've seen over the years. But that's not to say that I didn't like this one. It's just that I thought the writing was really strong and the ideas were really strong. I just wish I think they actually may have needed a little bit more time to, and that happens probably for every short filmmaker.
That's a fact.
Can we have more time, a little bit more budget? Can I maybe do a longer edit that's now another 5 minutes to tell more of the story that I had written down in the screenplay?
Right.
And I've definitely seen that happen with a lot of short films. Like, wow, I can really see where they're trying to go with this. And if they only had another 12 hours or if they only had another whatever, then they probably themselves would be said, yeah, Mark, that's exactly it. I'm just trying to get here, but we had to go right here.
Yeah.
And I'm happy with it. I'm proud of it. But I wish if I could go back, I would do one change to this thing.
Absolutely. Always. I don't know any film that doesn't feel that way, though, even maybe feature films. But yeah, that's real. And I know budget is always the concern. You always have to make sure that you keep it in the budget. And if you keep it in the budget, then you usually lose at least a day that would have been really beneficial.
Yeah, many actors, filmmakers, producers, directors, screenplay, right? Everything that one of the questions I usually ask is there anything now that your product is done that you would go back and change? And they always have something. There's always something. And it's also interesting just hearing the behind the scenes. Like I had, oh my gosh, Renee Geerlings and Tyler Main on. They both did a film, feature film, a horror film. And during, I think it was like the middle of filming, they lost some of their funding. And so like, oh crap, now what are we going to do? So what they ended up doing was the location that they had to scrap that location and they turned their own house into the location. And it was so fascinating because once we were done with that live stream, which is on my YouTube channel, by the way, folks, from 2020, that she grabbed her laptop and said, Mark, I'll walk you around. So she walked me to like, where's their library now where they live. And she said, this is where we did the medical room. And this is where we did this. And I'm like, that looks completely different from what I saw. And she's like, I know, you can imagine the mess we had in our own home to make this work, but we had to get creative because we lost half our budget.
I have worked on so many film sets. I mean, especially early on, right? Where it was like, we're shooting in somebody's poor house where I'm looking around. I'm like, how can you live like this? Like you're living here while we're also shooting for 6 days or whatever. And like, it's a wreck. It's messed up. There's a reason. I mean, film locations will pay really well if you're willing to give your house to a film shoot and let them just wreck the house and then put it all back together in theory by the time you come home. But I've also heard a lot of horror stories about that because cameras are enormous pieces of equipment. The grip set, I mean, boom makes all of it. Like, it's massive. And they're going to dent your walls. Like, they just are. But it also reminded me when you mentioned in horror, it's all been done. I saw something recently. You saw The Substance, I assume.
Oh, I did, yeah.
Of course. I was like, that's one that you've seen. I came across people who were like calling out the director and showing side-by-side shots that like she shot, and also like that exact same shot from The Shining or that exact same shot from Clockwork Orange. And I was like, yeah, no, she knows. She's not ripping it off. Like, it's also just sort of how horror does. A lot of times it pulls and lifts from like classics and icons, and it's an homage. It's paying respect to everything that's come before in a lot of ways. And I mean, I thought that movie was visually stunning, and at no point did I not think everything felt familiar, which is, I think, exactly what they were going for. Like, there was so much of it that felt familiar while the story itself was entirely original and unique, I felt.
Yeah, no, I agree. That watching that film, and I actually came very late to it. There's people around here locally that are also horror fans and would see me at Crypticon Seattle and all that kind of thing, which is a horror convention. So, Mark, have you seen The Substance yet? Have you gone to the theater? It's going to be streaming on Mubi, this kind of thing. I say, I'll get to it. I'm kind of busy with things.
Yeah, right.
And I didn't see it till, I want to say maybe sometime in January is when I finally saw it, because I know it came out in the fall.
Sure.
And I really enjoyed it. I definitely saw her nod and tip of the cap to certain filmmakers and certain films.
Yeah.
And I haven't really read many interviews with her, but I did watch her debut film because of The Substance. I said, well, this is so interesting. I'm gonna go watch Revenge now. And that one also has some similarities. It's a very different film than The Substance, but you'll see her techniques are like pretty similar. So, okay.
Ooh.
This is interesting that you only have 2 feature films, because I was telling somebody locally that when I watched The Substance, I thought, oh, this gal must have been doing maybe at least 5 features by now, at least. And then when I found out she's only done 2,
yeah,
I'm like,
well, it's mind blowing, because how does someone with such a short filmography, how do they manage to get lined up with this like Hollywood A-listers that she did? It was incredible, and such a brilliant movie. Like, I mean, regardless of whether you liked it or not, I think you have to acknowledge like some genius in it, because I think I'm not a body horror person, so there was a lot about it that I had to be like, I think I had to stop and start it like 4 or 5 times, which I know ruins what the movie is supposed to be and do. But my stomach honestly started churning so many times I had to walk away and be like, I can't, I feel sick. But man, I think it was a very creative way to say something that I feel like a lot of women in Hollywood have been trying to say and being ignored. So I was like, you made it so they can't ignore it. Like, that's true.
yeah, absolutely. And I'm just like you. I'm amazed with any, not just filmmakers, but like any musicians or other artistic folks, that when they already have a style so early, it's like, how the heck do you?
Yeah.
For me, it takes repetition. It takes more experience. It takes all these kind of things to find what I'm trying to do. Like, even like with these live stream interviews, I didn't have stuff together in my own style in the first 5 or even the first 100. And for her to have 2 features and already be like, oh, that's her style already.
This is my signature. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, so I'm really fascinated to see her next film, like what she tackles and how she tackles it from a filmmaker's perspective, let alone what she's presenting to the public on screen. And see if she just continues to build upon this already established style. So,
I hope that she does, and I hope she leaves room for herself to fully evolve into something different if she wants to. I feel like some artists we can point to and be like, oh yeah, that became your style and you got stuck inside of it, and I hope she just keeps lending herself to everything she chooses to, because I'm here for it. I haven't seen her first movie though, so I have to watch that.
Yeah, it's I'll be interested to hear what you think once you get a chance to check out Revenge.
Perfect.
And again, you'll notice certain things, especially being a filmmaker yourself. You'll notice certain techniques that she's using. Oh, that's just like the substance. It's like, well, no, it was here first, and then she used it in the substance.
Sure.
But I'm with you. She's, I think, got a really tremendous future, and hopefully she doesn't get bogged down in all the stuff and white noise around her, especially right now because there's so much of a spotlight on her. Yeah. And just like, you know what? Try to remember, like in your heart of hearts, who you are as an artist and what you want to do, because you actually have the platform now. You can actually do it.
Right.
And, damn the torpedoes, basically. Just do what you want to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So everybody, just letting you know that we've got about 15 minutes left, and something that we talked about last month was about food, snacks, just, edible things. And we talked about it live on the stream about maybe trying to try things that either Kate and I both haven't had, or one of us hasn't had, or just different things. And offline, we were kind of throwing things back and forth about stuff that we saw and found. And, have you had this? Can you, is this something you want to try? And I believe this will be something that we'll come back to when we want to, especially because, like, Kate, you mentioned about that alcoholic beverage from your area. So I know that, and I mentioned too that I could find it out here, and but it was like I can't justify buying that right now. But I know we're going to get to a point where I think something's going to be going through the mail, like something I have here that you've never had, and I'll just get it, send it to you, and then vice versa. And then it might be even just like a little vial of that alcohol sent it my way.
Absolutely.
And then we can be like, just kind of waiting in anticipation about what the other person thinks when they actually do it live.
It'll be so fun.
Yeah, so this should be the beginning of the food thing. So I think it's interesting because we have plenty of time. That I kind of, I don't know if this is right or wrong, but I kind of view this as we're having this dialogue back and forth about what we found locally and what we didn't, and what I've already had and what you've already had. That I'm like the before of like what you shouldn't be doing food wise, and Kate's like, to me, the after. Like, if you eat right and do fruits and vegetables and things like that, you could be like this. Because I'll give context for folks that are watching and listening that I had gone to my local grocery store, saw some different types of apples and whatever else, and I'm thinking I hadn't even heard of this. And I took pictures and sent them to Kate, and she's like, "Oh yeah, I've had all those." I'm like, "How have you had all these already when I don't even know they exist?" But it also goes to show you, I mean, how many times am I in the produce section when I go on a weekly trip to the grocery store? I go through there, but I don't get as much as I probably should.
I'm not an apple monogamist, I think is the other thing. I didn't know that there are people that are like, I only eat gala apples. And I'm like, oh, I just find whichever ones are cheapest. And then sometimes if I feel like going crazy, I'll get one of the biggest ones. Like, I just go all over the place. So yeah, I've tried them all. And then you also sent a couple pears, but I'd had those pears too. But also the difference is, and I was mentioning this to Mark earlier, I live in Rogers Park in Chicago. Rogers Park is one of the most diverse neighborhoods of any community across the country, if not, I actually want to say it's the world. We have huge populations of Nigerian people here, and I think Venezuelan, and I mean, like it's a lot. Like, if we go out to our local, I'm pointing out the window, like you can see it. We go out to our playground, and like I hear 4 or 5 languages on the playground, and I love it. It's great. So for that reason, my fruit market here has a lot of different kinds of produce too. And so when I went there to find some things, it doesn't take much for me to find things. I'm like, I don't even know what this is. And so I sent Mark some photos of what I had, and he's like, I don't know any of those. Just get one if you want to. And like, we'll just go from there. But in the end, we did end up both finding the same fruit, which was very exciting, that we've never had before. And I really cannot wait to try this.
Yeah, it's so interesting that we have, for folks that don't know, dragon fruit, and Kate's got the yellow version, and I've got this kind of reddish version.
So funny to eat it.
Yeah, and I have my bowl and my knife and my spoon and everything here. So we're going to be getting into this now, as we have like 10 minutes left of our live stream. And seeing what this is like.
Oh, she's juicy. Oh, she just,
Yeah.
oh. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Yeah. Got the seeds in it and the flesh. And
All right. So what are you going to do? I'm just going to cut it in fourths and then take a big bite out of it.
I'm going to use a spoon and like a
Okay.
grapefruit and just start digging.
All right. Perfect.
All right. So here's
We're going to have seeds in our mouth in a second. Like they're going to be all up in our teeth.
It's going to be great for my interview.
Mm. Oh my God. It's like a kiwi, but not as tart.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my God, it's so good. It also pulls away from the peel actually really easily. Probably just bend it in half.
The store that I got this one at, they had the yellow ones too, but they cost more. So that's why I got this one. But now I'm curious about the yellow one.
Well, I think the only thing I know different between the yellow and the pink is the yellow I believe is sweeter.
Okay.
Is yours? Mine's very sweet.
This is not. I'm trying. It almost like the texture of it reminds me a little bit of a pear. And it's not as sweet as what yours sounds like it is.
Can't wait to find out if I'm allergic to dragon fruit. Wouldn't that be fun?
So it's happening right now.
Right?
Skin breaks out. You can't breathe.
Oh my God. No, this is dumb delicious. Like I'm really mad that I didn't know about this. Like this is, I'm delighted. I'll be curious. Next time I have to try the pink one. But yeah, this is it's very sweet. It's very mild. It's like a kiwi that doesn't want to hurt you.
And look what it took to get you to a point of trying raw dragon fruit. It took a live stream recurring series.
There you go.
About your acting and your filmmaking world.
See, but isn't this more fun than just doing like, Kate, tell me about acting. Tell me more about acting. Tell me more about your, like, I feel like people will get so bored. And now we can tell them, everyone else is probably gonna be like, yeah, we know dragon fruit. You didn't invent dragon fruit, but I didn't know about it. This is great.
I totally agree. And that's why, as you and I were throwing ideas back and forth just in general about what are we going to do and what are we going to talk about, in these future ones, this is the kind of stuff that is great because it's unique to this series. I don't plan on trying fruit or actually any food on Lowe's. I want that staying here. And yeah, I'm the same way. Like, let's do something left of center because we have to mix it up some. And I know, and I've seen so many of these types of things on YouTube where they're trying British snacks or or hot ones, with the hot wings and all that kind of thing.
Oh my God, I will never do a hot ones.
I'm not a spice person. I can have some just as flavor, but when it's like that kind of thing, which is burning you up, no, I'm out.
There have been a handful that they've done where I'm like, oh, the way they're describing it, I would be curious to try that one. Where it's like it's very spicy, but it has so much flavor. That's how I feel like we talked about Nigerian food last time, I think. Nigerian food has so much flavor. It might leave me feeling like I'm breathing fire, but it doesn't bother me in the same way. And some of them just feel like they're just chemicals up the nose. And so it's like I drained that guy. This is my new favorite fruit. I'm delighted. That was real good.
That's awesome. I would normally eat all of this, but since I have my interview and I know my body, that I'm going to come back to this when I get back from the interview.
Try to stick with all the standards and all the norms. I get that. Till after the interview.
Yeah. I just, I don't want to end up with some issues.
Yeah, that would probably be awkward.
Yeah. Where's your restroom at?
I was gonna say, is it in person? It's an in-person interview.
It is. I have to drive up north to it. That's why I'm like, yeah. I took 3 big scoops out of this thing. But so looks like a bowl. But yeah, no, it's just great. And like, it's always awesome to try different things, at least from me, except for like when it comes to activities, there's a few things like, and people say, Mark, get over your fear. And I'm like, I don't give a shit. I'm not going to do that. I have a friend who's like, she's kind of like an adrenaline junkie. So
Oh,
she knows, she'll be like, Mark, let's go do this. And I'm like, no.
yeah.
You won't even consider? I was like, no, I'm not jumping out of a plane, or I'm not going on I don't like heights. That's my issue.
It's
And
real.
some heights I can be like, if we go up to the observation deck at the Space Needle, I'm totally fine with that
Oh,
here.
well,
That's not an it.
why is that
That,
not, that, you are better at heights than I am then.
well, and truth be told, though, since they've remodeled it and they have that glass floor that you can be standing on, I haven't experienced that. So,
Yeah, same. We have that
uh,
here in Chicago too. And I'm like, no, you guys can keep that. I think we also have the one that you can hold on to and you can bend forward. Like it's like
oh,
it
yeah.
tilts. No, thank you. I'm good.
Yeah, no, I'm very good. I don't want to experience that. Even when if I watch a film like I think it's with the second Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, and it's just going like a big like handmade drawbridge in the forest kind of thing. And they're like, I don't know how many feet above the water below. No, if that was real life, I would not be crossing that thing. I don't care who's there or how sturdy it seems, or no, not doing it.
Yeah. I have a few little phobias, but I auditioned just a couple weeks ago for a movie where I would have to get buried alive. And they were saying, they're like, you need to make sure that you're okay with this material, you're okay with all these things. And I was like, I am, as as long as it's done safely, but I also just couldn't. And I'm like, how much? They have to get the soil on your face shot, probably. But then, like, how much? Like, and the more I thought about it, like after I submitted the audition, where I felt really sure about it, and then the more time that passed, I was like, I don't think that I want that. I don't think I could do
Well,
it.
and that brings up, and we only have a few minutes, but it brings up the question too, like for you as someone that's been doing television, film, and theater, that yeah, especially for television and film, that you can have multiple takes of the same thing that could be really like awful the first time, let alone the 12th time or the 20th time for them to get the shot of the different angles that they need. And I kind of going back to what we were talking about with the short film, I think about horror scenes,
Yeah.
that how, how many times did you have to do that? And that's got to mess with your head. I mean, it's got to, no matter,
Oh,
you've got all
sure.
these people around and all these cameras and all this crew and all that, but you're the one experiencing it.
Yeah, I think people don't realize, and I think this is such a like a common thing that actors know about ourselves, but I don't know that other people know that when we're acting, our brain doesn't recognize pretend. Our brain doesn't recognize acting. So when we're in great stress on stage or on camera and we are screaming and we're frightened for our life, your brain is genuinely in survival mode in that moment. And so like there's so much about that that is like, well, how long do you want to live there? Because yeah, if you're shooting a film, you could sustain that for exactly too long. Now, most good SAG films these days are going to be able to look at that and be like, we will tap you out at 10 takes, and either we'll come back to it later or we got what we need. But yeah, no, it's very real. And I look at a lot of movies that way, and I think about that. I'm like, oh God, I hope that they gave that to you in 2 takes and they said you got it. Oh, but yeah, I don't know. Not everybody do I know what they would do. And getting buried alive, I'm still open to it. Like the thing is, I would still be open to it. I just would need to know, tell me how we do that safely. Tell me how much of me has to go in the dirt. And is it just Oreos? Because I think that my claustrophobia would be cool if it was just crushed Oreos. I'd be like, that's fine. I'm gonna have a great old time. Like this is not a problem. I don't know.
There's a film that I probably won't recommend to you, knowing how you are with watching horror films, because there's definitely, just like everything, there's a whole gamut of different types of horror films, and there's definitely an extreme end of it. And even for me, there's certain films like after reading from what fans have said, I'm like, I don't need to see that. Based on what you said, I don't even need to be curious about that film.
Yep.
But there's a few, and one in particular that I actually own on Blu-ray. I can see it over there on my table right now. That is so extreme, but also really so beautiful depending on how you interpret the film. But I can only imagine what those two actresses went through to make that thing. They've even talked openly about that. They probably wouldn't work with that director again because it was so exhausting and so intense the entire time, and they had to do multiple takes and put their heads into these spaces that are just rough beyond belief.
Yeah.
And I understand that because just watching it, they're trying to basically make the audience into a martyr by you watching what's happening to the screen and to the characters. And it's considered by some horror fans maybe one of the top 3 horror films ever made because of that. It's so unique by itself, but then it's so extreme and so again intense that it's like I feel like I just got beat up watching it.
And we can talk about this maybe next time because I know we're short on time at this point, but I have really strong feelings about the lengths we put actors through that are mentally, emotionally, physically unsafe, and that those movies I think should be taken away from the shelves. You know, like I generally don't think that they should exist, and I know that lots of people would disagree with me about that and be like, well, then what did the actor do it for? But I think it's not okay to watch someone else's abuse, and I think in the movies where we see that happening, especially when the actors themselves have said like I'm not happy, like The Room, you know, like I think of The Room as one of the hardest things to watch because I just look at that woman who did not know what she was getting into and the power dynamics that were completely against her. Anyway, but we can talk about that another time. All this to say, yeah, that sounds like a beautiful movie, and I would also, you're right, that I would have a really hard time. I probably wouldn't watch it either.
Yeah, and there's a whole because it was kind of the front end of the new French extreme movement. So a lot of these films came from France. That one actually was, I don't know if it was actually from France or from French Canadian film, but yeah, it's I completely understand if people are like, why did they even make this thing, or why are you watching it, Mark? And, you know, why do you own it? And like this one in particular, there's parts of it that really kind of spoke to my like creative side of things, but at the same time I'm watching this, I'm like, God, that had to be horrible for these people to go through. But it also, in one person's case, gave them a career. They're still making films to this day, and they're like that was, people come up to her, man, that your role in blah 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 was just so amazing, and she can still talk about it, but she also probably gets triggered by talking about it too, is my guess.
I'm sure. Yeah.
So but as we are wrapping up episode 4, parting words from you, Kate, on anything that you'd like to say, or just things that are coming up, or anything off the top of your head?
I don't think so. I can't think of anything that I'm sure there's like 5 things once we're done. I'll be like, I should have mentioned that. I don't know what they are. So I got really great Sudafed head going on today. So I'm just really unclear. So I'm going to say, no, not today. How about you? What do you want to end with?
I'll end with that. If you are not tired of seeing me talk on this format, please join me tomorrow night at 5 p.m. Pacific for, and I have to write it down, What You Seek is Seeking You. That's the new recurring series with Drez Ryan, who is an actor out of the Georgia area, and he's in a Sleep Number commercial right now with his partner. If you want, you might be able to catch that depending on where you live. And I just had Drez on like a couple weeks ago, and we always get into like philosophical discussions, and he's a deep thinker, life coach kind of person. And so we do not have topics. I'll let everybody know this right now. Here's your exclusive. We do not have topics for this. We decided that we're going to try to figure this out live.
Ooh.
He's like, yeah, let's go for it. And we'll come up with topics, a list, so that we have those for future sessions. And so I don't know here's that control thing. I don't know where it's going. He's going to come. He'll come to the table with lots of different details and things of that nature. And quickly, for locals here in the Seattle area, if you can get over to the Fifth Avenue Theater where they're doing Waitress, the musical, that was one of the best things I've seen the Fifth Avenue do. I was there opening night on Friday. I can also tell you that Edmund's Driftwood Players, I was there on Thursday. They're doing Clue, the musical. Their run's already sold out. So if you want to get on the wait list, you can contact the theater, and if some tickets become available, then they'll contact you directly. And then this coming week, As If Theater opens up on Thursday. I will be there Friday. So if you want to harass me, you can come on Friday. Don't come on Thursday at opening night. And then Taproot Theater opens up Raisin in the Sun, and I will be there on Saturday for that production. It's back in the main stage, the Jewel Main Stage Theater, where they have just done a renovation. So I'm interested to see what the theater looks like now. And so there's lots of local things here, theater-wise, musical-wise, that you can check out. And that's just a snippet of it. There's a bunch of other things out there. So hopefully in your neck of the woods, wherever you are, that you can try to catch live anything, theater, comedy, concert, something in the arts, because trust me, they're going to need more support now than ever based on where things are headed. I see funding cuts coming. I see grants getting pulled. I see some places probably closing their doors because they rely so much on federal money and grants that they won't be able to sustain themselves. So they need people like us to get out there and go to these things and also understand what's going on, have that dialogue. Anytime I go to opening night, all of the people for that theater are there trying to smooch and talk to people and say hi. And not just because I'm media, just people in general, the patrons that show up. So I can't emphasize enough that if you're sitting on the couch on Friday or Saturday or whatever day and you're like, yeah, I think I'm just going to stream something again. It's like, well, go see something live. Go get out there. There's different price ranges from community theater up to, touring things and everything in between. You'll find something that fits your budget for sure.
Yeah. And that applies, I think, in every city, everywhere. I think people don't realize that there are theaters in their own communities sometimes, just because you might not have ever heard of it. It might not be well publicized. That's not where they spend their money. So do your research, see what you can find.
Absolutely. And until next month, which will be April. Where's this year going? It's ridiculous.
I don't know. Time is frightening right now.
Yeah, but Kate, I hope you feel better and that everything goes away. And I look forward to seeing you next month.
Thank you. I can't wait to hear about your new job next month.
Yeah, that makes two of us. Take care and take care, everybody. Bye-bye.